Two teenagers have just been seen in court for the horrific murder of Jack Snyder. Back in February, Jack was driving home from his girlfriend's birthday party when he saw two younger boys on the side of the road. It was freezing that night in Michigan, so out of kindness, he offered them a ride home. According to court documents, when 13-year-old DeWand and 14-year-old Justice entered the car, they demanded Jack pull over and remove the keys from the ignition. There was, quote, a struggle for the keys, and then Justice aimed a gun he had stolen from his mother. As we now know, Jack was fatally shot twice. The boys tragically left him to die in the street and didn't even bother taking his car. About a week later, in late February, tips submitted by the community led to the arrest of 14-year-old Justice Chimney. And then the following day, 13-year-old DeWand Estes walked himself into the police station with a parent and turned himself in. With the boys appearing in court, it's apparent that both of their defenses are trying to pin the case on the other. We do know someone asked DeWand over Snapchat that night to steal a vehicle for a few $100s. So today, both boys are being tried as adults in connection to Jack's murder. And the court is reportedly being asked to designate 13-year-old DeWand, so in the case he is found guilty, there can be a blended sentence. And as for Jack, he never got to graduate high school or continue playing the sport that he loved. If you would like to donate to the family, the link will be in my bio. A massive search is underway for a father of four accused of killing his wife. On Sunday morning around 9 a.m., Breezy and Aaron Pennington's four kids showed up at their neighbor's house in Gardner, Massachusetts. At ages 2, 5, 7, and 9, they were reportedly scared because they couldn't find their father and their mother was crying in her bedroom. As we know, police were at the scene in 5 minutes, but tragically it was too late. They went upstairs and found that Breezy wasn't crying anymore. The 30-year-old was pronounced deceased from a gunshot wound to the face at 9:30 a.m. Now, as confirmed by surveillance footage, Aaron had actually left the house that morning at 8:50. And then on Monday night, his unoccupied BMW was found in the woods of a Boy Scout camp 4 miles away. In what is now a manhunt, police say they are searching all of 400 acres to find Aaron. That he has a military background, spent the past 7 years in active service, and knows how to survive in these woods. Aside from that, court documents have revealed that Breezy had been saving up money to leave Aaron and move to Texas with their kids. Her sister says that on the outside he's a very nice person, but has been struggling with mental health issues that just kept getting worse. He also didn't have a license to carry a gun in Massachusetts, but Breezy reportedly kept one for her own safety. Today, the Penningtons' kids remain under custody of the state, with police asking anyone who sees Aaron to not approach him, but immediately call 911. Breezy was, quote, the funniest person. She had the best/worst dark humor. She loved true crime and, most importantly, her babies. She brought light to everyone that knew her, cheered for everyone, and made motherhood seem effortless. This is what we know about the murder of 9-year-old Xander Lyda. Last week, authorities released footage of a 12-year-old girl being detained after fatally stabbing her younger brother. Her name hasn't been released, but their mom, April, has made a statement. We now know that just before midnight on January 5th, April heard screams coming from inside the family's Tulsa home. She thought maybe Xander was having a nightmare, but then found blood seeping through his bedsheets. She assumed her daughter had run for safety from an intruder. When police got to the scene, it was clear that wasn't the case. The girl cried and admitted she stabbed her brother 3 times in the chest with a kitchen knife as he was trying to sleep. Per April's statement, this was, quote, a medication issue and not anything else. She's explained that her daughter was medicated for ADHD prior to the attack, but then taken off due to irritability and self-harm. She says that it was too late and the damage from the medication had already been done. We also now know that 2 weeks prior, this girl had, quote, reached out to a few of her friends and told them she was having thoughts about stabbing Xander. Reportedly, April didn't know about this. She says her daughter is a normal 12-year-old and there were no signs this could have happened. She also maintains that her kids loved each other until the very end and that her daughter has no idea why she did it. So as of today, the 12-year-old has been undergoing treatment at a juvenile facility for about 6 months. Her mom says that she has been doing really well and that she has her full love and support. And as for how long this girl will be away, reports indicate that she will likely be released by time she's 18. Had she been just a few months older, it could have been a completely different story. Under Oklahoma law, 13-year-olds can be tried as adults. The McGuad family adopted an orphan, but then she killed their children. Raised in the Philippines in 2021, Gwen McGuad made a new friend. Her name was Janice, and when Gwen asked her about her parents, she said she didn't have any. We now know that 8 years before, a woman had actually stumbled upon 8-year-old Janice all alone on a ship. She knew her name, but claimed she had no memory of her life prior to that day. In the end, no one claimed Janice, and she was placed under custody of the Department of Social Welfare. Then, at 17, a family near the town of Malang hired her as a live-in nanny. She was out with them when she met Gwen. As the girls got closer that summer, Gwen and her younger brother Lewis sat their parents down and pleaded for them to adopt Janice. They've said that at first they were skeptical. They worked as educators, so there was limited income, and they didn't have an extra bedroom. But then Lewis offered up his room. Just being the people they were, they agreed to take her in, believing that perhaps this was their purpose on Earth. In the months leading up to the murders, the McGuads enrolled Janice in school, and she took their last name. The morning of December 10th was just like any other. Cruz and Lavella made the kids breakfast and then headed to work as a school teacher and principal. It was 2:58 p.m. when Janice began to make a series of disturbing posts from her Facebook. She claimed that 3 men had broken into the house and she was hiding under her bed. Immediately, Cruz rushed home where he found his biological children deceased in the living room. Autopsies reported that altogether they were beaten, strangled, and stabbed more than 70 times. Interestingly, when Janice came downstairs, she was completely unharmed and soaking wet. She said that after the attackers left, she'd taken a shower to calm herself down. While there was a lot wrong with Janice's story, a plastic bag found in a creek near the home sealed her fate. It appeared the killer threw it in thinking it would wash away, but it didn't. Inside was a bat with fingerprints belonging to Janice. When confronted, Janice immediately broke down and admitted she'd carried out the plan with a still unidentified 17-year-old boy. That she killed Gwen out of jealousy, and while stabbing her, she screamed out, quote, "This is just a dream. I am still going to be a doctor. I don't know what I did wrong to you. Janice, I love you very much." Ultimately, both Gwen and the boy were sentenced to 32 years. It turns out Janice did have parents and 3 siblings, and to this day it remains unclear whether she was abandoned on that ship. This father had 3 weeks to escape after killing his family, and no one knows where he is. The DuPont de Leon's kids grew up with wealth and religious status, but completely unaware of their family's secrets. It was April 11th when a neighbor of theirs in Nantes finally noticed something off about their home. Xavier and his family's blinds were closed, but they were always open, so after a few more days without seeing anyone, they contacted police. As we know, 5 welfare checks were conducted between the 13th and the 19th, with authorities walking through to really find nothing out of place. But as the week went on, their relatives began receiving these letters, claiming that they had all moved to the U.S. to work for the DEA and witness protection. Xavier wrote that they'd given their 2 labs to a friend and demanded secrecy about all of it, buying him even more time. Now, likely according to his plan, it wasn't until a 6th welfare check on the 21st when an officer discovered a hidden board under the back deck. She pulled it back and horribly found Agnes, the kids, and the dogs buried in 2 separate graves. They had been dead for weeks, and of course, their quote, noble father was missing. Now from here, autopsies would report that everyone was shot in their sleep on April 3rd, except for Xavier's oldest son, Thomas. He was actually shot 2 days later after coming home from his college, and seemingly with hesitation. As investigators began to work out why this was the case, and where Xavier even was, they found that he spent an entire week at the house after the murders. He put all this time into cleaning the scene and preparing his escape, but it was so strange because when he did finally run on the 10th, he didn't even try to hide. He went to lunches, used his credit cards, and looked directly into security cameras, as if he wanted investigators to eventually follow him on this exact route. As investigators would learn, Xavier continued to travel through the 14th, with still no one knowing what happened to his family. And then, that night, so about 7 days before the bodies were found, he parked his car at this hotel 10 hours away. He looked into the parking lot camera one last time, and then disappeared into the mountains. Again, it was like he wanted investigators to think he took his life. Now, by time police did catch up to this hotel after the murders, they had found that Xavier wasn't living the life that everyone believed. He did have this French noble history, but really, he spent most of his money trying to move his family to Florida in the early 2000s. And the idea is that he was running out of time before everyone found out, so he destroyed his family lineage. And he hesitated to kill Thomas because he was the heir to their name. As we know, police conducted one of the most extensive searches ever to find Xavier, but they never did. The reality is that too may have been a part of his plan, to deceive everyone into searching there and buy even more time. Today, many suspect that Xavier may have gotten on a cargo ship, hitchhiked the highway to Italy, or taken a train to Croatia to start a new life. He has obviously never been found, so let me know what you think. Did he manage to get away with it? This self-made millionaire was found in garbage bags at his New York condo, and there are finally updates in his case. Fahim Saleh was the technology CEO, but on July 13th, his cousin horribly found him dismembered on Manhattan's Lower East Side. The killer had fled down a back stairwell just as she walked in, with his body parts still scattered and a chainsaw plugged into the wall. As we know, when police checked surveillance footage from the day before, they found that Fahim was followed into his elevator by a man wearing a black suit, mask, and latex gloves. It's a kind of private elevator that opens up directly into its residence units, and his killer pressed the number for a higher level that he wouldn't have been able to access. He suddenly got off right behind Fahim at his unit on the 7th floor, and you could see that he falls to the ground as the elevator doors closed behind them. From here, police were able to confirm that Fahim was tased before suffering multiple stab wounds to his torso, and that whoever followed him into the elevator that day had already been in the lobby for 5 hours, just waiting for him to get home. They were immediately convinced it was a professional hit, so it came as a shock to everyone when they found his 21-year-old personal assistant was using his credit card to buy his girlfriend gifts. When police looked into this further, they found that Tyrese had used that card to get all of the cleaning supplies that were found at the scene. They looked at his phone records too, and that showed that at the time Fahim would have been dismembered, he was Google searching for where to find the joints on a human body. It became clear that the only reason he wasn't still in the apartment when Fahim's cousin showed up was because the cordless saw he was using had just died, and he had to go back to Home Depot to get a charger. Within 3 days, Tyrese Haspel was charged with Fahim's murder, and actually just as quickly why he did it became clear. Fahim took Tyrese in to work for him when he was just 16, and he was trusted with all of his finances and personal matters. But in January of 2020, so 6 months before the murder, Fahim found out that he had stolen $100,000 from his accounts. He confronted Tyrese about it over email, and as you can see, he initially pretended he had no idea what he was talking about. Eventually, Tyrese did admit to stealing money, and just being the person he was, Fahim told him he wouldn't contact police. He came up with an entire payment plan for Tyrese to pay him back, never knowing he would do so with more of his money, or that he had actually stolen like $400,000. And it's unbelievable, but for years Tyrese had set up what looked to be real accounts that Fahim would be paying, and the money was actually going to him. Fahim didn't know this when he died, or that when he trusted him to come over and watch his apartment and his dog, he would have friends over and pretend it was all his own. Today, prosecutors allege that Tyrese killed Fahim because he didn't want him to find out the truth. He pleads not guilty, and it has just been revealed that he plans to argue he was mentally disturbed in the weeks around the attack. If the jury finds this to be true, he reportedly will serve far less time, and his murder charge could be reduced to manslaughter. And I haven't gotten into this, but what Fahim founded is called Godaka, and it's a rideshare company like Lyft or Uber, but for motorcycles. After 4 years, we finally know more about what happened to Suzanne Morphew. If you've been following, you know Suzanne seemingly vanished while riding her bike on Mother's Day. Her husband Barry was initially arrested, but without a body, prosecutors dropped the charges against him. They then found her in the desert about 7 months ago, with her autopsy just reporting that she was murdered and she had animal tranquilizers in her system. Now with this, officials say that back on Mother's Day weekend, both of the couple's daughters were camping out of town. Suzanne had also just told Barry that she wanted to leave him, but when he came home from running errands that Saturday, he reportedly got confirmation of her affair. You see, that afternoon, Suzanne's last proof of life came at 2:03 p.m. and a selfie that she sent to a man who they both went to high school with. She never responded to his message at 2:44, which is the same time that Barry's phone showed him running back and forth around their house. He would later claim that he was chasing chipmunks with a tranquilizer gun, but it's alleged that he was actually chasing his wife. Now at this point, around 3 p.m., Barry would turn his phone into airplane mode for nearly 8 hours. He again said he was just enjoying time with Suzanne, but officials think he hit her and created a false alibi. They actually think he set everything up to make it seem like she would go missing on a bike ride. That night, Barry maintains they both went to bed around 8, while his truck would show that it reversed up and towards the house at 9:30. And then at 4 a.m., he was just out driving, later claiming that he was chasing bull elk down the road. Now, as we know, Suzanne wouldn't be there later that Sunday when her daughters came home to wish her a happy Mother's Day. With her bike gone, the thought was that she was injured somewhere, but as panic set in for her girls, their dad actually wasn't home. Around 5 a.m., Barry had turned his phone back on, and he left for a work trip nearly 3 hours north in Denver. You can see he was first seen there around 10 a.m., dumping tranquilizer darts into dumpsters, and then walking into his hotel, where he stayed until he learned that his wife was missing. Now, when Barry did come home from work that night, he would be informed that Suzanne's bike had already been found off a local road. He would repeatedly blame her alcohol problems and suggest a mountain lion attack, but despite having their daughter's support, he was eventually charged with her presumed death. This charge was of course then dropped, but prosecutors always said that when they found her, they could charge him again. And they actually found her this past September. On the 22nd, we know investigators were actually out on another case when they discovered Suzanne's remains. And you can see this is in an area east of the family's home, and not up near Denver where Barry was working and where she was thought to be. It also does seem that it's been too long to determine an exact cause of death, but we do know she had those animal tranquilizers in her system. This is of course meant to sedate wildlife, and we also know that Barry had some. As of today, it seems investigators will keep on Barry, but he is still a free man with his kids. And I will just say there are hundreds of pages of court documents detailing the abuse that Suzanne was a victim to. I'm going to tag that in my bio for anyone who is interested, but may we all hope that these new details give investigators what they need.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
A missing boy has been found after 6 years, and his story is almost unbelievable. Last Wednesday around 2 a.m., a chiropractic student was delivering medicine to the rural mountains of France. He was reportedly between 2 villages when he saw the now teenager walking through the pouring rain. As we know, the kid told the student that his name was Zach and that he had been walking for 4 days. He was shy and really couldn't speak good French, but after being spoken to in English, he revealed his true identity. When Zach said that his name was actually Alex Batty, the student looked him up right there on his phone and found that he had been reported missing from the UK in 2000. 2017. The pair actually went on to talk for hours, and as they completed the delivery route together, Alex told him all about his kidnapping and his recent escape. The kind student allowed him to send this Facebook message from his phone and ultimately dropped him off at a police station at the foothill of the mountain. With the confirmation of Alex's identity, we know that 6 years ago, he went on a prearranged vacation to Spain with his mother and his grandfather. But they didn't have custody of Alex, his grandmother did. Her daughter and ex-husband basically sent her this cryptic YouTube video at the end of the trip to say that they wouldn't be bringing him home to her in the UK. Now from here, we know that between 2017 and 2021, Alex was moved across religious communes in Spain and Morocco. And ultimately, in the fall of that year, he was forced to settle here at a remote mountain house in the French Pyrenees. It consists of 10 to 12 changing residents who all believe in reincarnation, and Alex and his grandfather actually started working for a family there in exchange for food and accommodation. His mother, though, Melanie, who believed COVID was created by the government, quote, didn't think it was the religious community that they were looking for. She moved to a campsite 30 miles west, and her possibly brainwashed son felt as though he was only free to go visit her. With that, we know that over the summer, Alex told this couple who was hosting him in the mountains that he was leaving. They say that they actually knew him as Zach, and that he expressed interest in going to school. That they also offered to drive him to the UK to get the identifying documents he needed, but he said he would get there on his own. In the end, when Zach left, he said he was going to be with his mother. But he's told police that when he got to her, she told him she wanted to move them to Finland to see the Northern Lights. So he finally walked away and kept walking for 4 days straight. Today, a manhunt is underway for Melanie Batty, but police believe that she may not have actually gone to Finland. And as for the grandfather, Alex told police that he died 6 months ago, so that was initially reported as fact. But now, neighbors from the French commune say that he is very much alive, and they saw him mowing his lawn 10 days ago. Authorities have since admitted that there's no death certificate, and they really don't know. So knowing that, there are reports that Alex may be protecting his grandfather. There aren't reports of him protecting his mother, but we do know he told the student that while his mom is a little crazy, he holds no animosity against her and just misses his loved ones. As of Friday, and 6 years after what should have been a 2-week vacation, Alex has finally returned to his loved ones in the UK. Reporters have already seen him out shopping, and he said he was glad to be home for Christmas. There are finally updates in the case of the father who drove his family off a cliff. If you've been following, you know the Patels survived crashing 250 feet off the San Mateo coast. Dharmesh Patel has since been charged with attempted murder, but last week, his wife pleaded with the court to let him come home. She said that he's her best friend, their family needs him, and that their kids are crying and asking why he's not there yet. It's actually being argued that he's a great candidate for mental health diversion because this was, quote, a one-time psychotic episode. If the court agrees, he will be put on a 2-year treatment plan. Now, still today, prosecutors are arguing that Dharmesh woke up that morning knowing he would kill his family. They reportedly all had plans that day to drive to his brother's house, but he initially said that when they got on the Pacific Coast Highway, their Tesla, quote, began to feel different. He said he was actually just trying to pull over and check a flat tire when they went over, and that just happened to be in a spot where dozens of people have taken their lives. Now, as we know, according to everyone else's account, what Dharmesh said is not what really happened. That morning, police have footage of him speeding down the highway before suddenly pulling a U-turn. That U-turn would have put him here on the side of the road closest to the water, and no one saw any brake lights as he drove right over the edge. These same witnesses called 911 around 10 that morning, and first responders could not believe it when they saw movement in the back seat. Now, knowing that, an entire rope system was set up from the highway, but it actually took hours before anyone could reach the family. As soon as they were finally able to, Neha Patel reportedly just started screaming, quote, he drove off, he's depressed, he's a doctor. He said he was going to drive off the cliff, he drove off on purpose. From here, the entire family was taken to the hospital, with experts crediting luck and the Tesla itself for their survival. And as for the injuries, it's actually unbelievable. Their 7-year-old walked away with nothing but bruises, but it also wasn't like things were going back to normal. And that same week, Dharmesh Patel was officially charged with the attempted murder of his family. And the immediate reaction was that it must have been an accident, with footage of him gifting neighbors flowers just days before. Then his attorney came forward and said his wife didn't want him in prison, and she just wanted him back home. Again, she has just pleaded with the court, and several doctors actually testified in her favor. Over the past year, Dharmesh has reportedly seen many specialists who say this was, quote, a psychotic episode that stemmed from his fears over current headlines in the world. And they say that his fears over his children had something to do with the news on Jeffrey Epstein, and again, that he would be a great addition to this new program. And basically, this program was introduced in 2018 as a treatment for defendants who are diagnosed with a mental illness that has a direct connection to the crime that they committed. It's not applicable for those accused of, quote, serious felonies such as murder, but Dharmesh is charged with attempted murder. Now from here, a judge will ultimately decide if Dharmesh poses a public safety threat and if mental health contributed to his decision. We basically have the defense and the family siding with this diversion program, but the prosecution disagrees and believes this should be settled in court. New details have come out in the terrifying case of 6-year-old Alicia McPhail. If you've been following, you know Alicia was abducted from her bed by 16-year-old Aaron Campbell. He's just been moved to an adult prison where he says he is terrified that he'll be targeted for what he did to her. You see, on July 2nd, Alicia was actually on vacation, visiting her dad on the Isle of Bute. He and his girlfriend reportedly watched Peppa Pig with her before bed, and then, like everyone there, they left the house key in the front door. Now, meanwhile, about 5 minutes away, then 16-year-old Aaron was celebrating the end of exams. He had about 15 friends over that night, but by 12:30, he reportedly got into a fight with his mom, and his attitude changed. One of his friends actually came up to his room to check on him, but he just insisted. After going to get some substances, he'd be fine. His friends then ended up leaving his house, and he texted the couple who was known to sell him said substances. And that was Alicia's 26-year-old father and his girlfriend. As we know, at 1:46, Aaron texted Robert like he always did, but with no response after 6 minutes, he decided to head over there himself. He then walked the 5 minutes to Alicia's grandparents' house where he lived, and armed with a kitchen knife, he simply walked inside. Alicia's bedroom was actually the closest room to the door, and as soon as he saw her, he, quote, knew that he had to kill her. From here, Aaron picked Alicia up, and he started walking with her along the shore. She actually woke up at one point and asked what was going on, but he told her he knew her dad and was just taking her home. Instead, he took her to the old site of the Isles of Bute Hotel, where he inflicted 117 catastrophic injuries. Tragically, a coroner would note that he violently shook her, and he took his time. Now, come the next morning, when Alicia wasn't in her bed, the entire town started searching. And then, around that same time, her dad and his girlfriend of course saw that they had this missed text from Aaron. They called him back that morning to ask what he needed and to see if he could help look for Alicia, but he responded, quote, "It doesn't matter anymore. And oh damn, I'm sure she's not gone too far." Now, by 8 that morning, a local searcher found Alicia's body, along with all of her clothing that had been thrown into the sea. Her funeral was held about 5 days later, but her mom wasn't the only mother there upset. Aaron's mom was there too, and she actually wanted to do anything she could to help. So she offered to check her family's security cameras. Now, when Jeanette checked these cameras, her heart sank, because there was her son leaving at the same time Alicia disappeared. She immediately went to ask him about it, but he must have had a good explanation. She ended up taking that footage and giving it to police in an effort to clear his name. As we know, while police initially brought Aaron in as a witness, he eventually confessed to the crime in detail. He was charged with murder on July 4th, but as if it couldn't get worse, he then said he was quite satisfied with what he'd done. He was then legally disowned by his parents, and for the first time in Scottish history, a judge ruled to release the juvenile's name. In the end, Aaron was sentenced to 27 years in prison, telling psychologists that he'd been having dark fantasies for years. He's already been hospitalized several times from attacks at the Young Offenders Institution, which may explain why he was training every day for this move to adult prison. Again, reports state that he knows he'll have a target on his back for what he did to Alicia. In one of the most terrifying cases, there is Maddie Clifton and how she was hidden under another child's bed. At 8 years old, Maddie was always out with the neighborhood kids, but on November 3rd, she didn't come home. Her older sister came running in for dinner around 6:30 that night, and for the first time, they weren't together. Jessie had no idea where Maddie went, but she did know that she was just across the street playing with their friend Josh. Now, after another 15 minutes, Maddie's mom called 911, with Josh and the entire neighborhood already out searching. Officers started going door to door that same week, but when they went by Josh's house, he changed his story. He said he wasn't even allowed to play with Maddie that day because he was older than her and his parents weren't home. They actually interviewed him as he sat on his bed, not realizing Maddie was under there or that he had been sleeping on top of her. Now, come November 10th, so 1 week after Maddie went missing, Josh's mom noticed this weird wet spot on the floor of his room. She ended up searching it, and at first, she couldn't figure out where it came from. There were just some air fresheners and Maddie's missing posters, but then her eyes caught something just below his bed. To her horror, it appeared to be a pair of human feet. With that, Josh's mom ran out of the house and straight for the agents that were posted outside of Maddie's. She immediately told them what she found, and then an officer came back with her and confirmed. There was Maddie, shoved into the bed frame of Josh's waterbed. She was still gripping the frame, with her throat cut, bat wounds to the head, and stab wounds to the chest. Tragically, a coroner would rule that she suffered 3 separate attacks, and that it was not quick or painless. Now, that afternoon, the news broke, and really no one could believe it. Josh was arrested at his middle school, and to say the least, he had quite the story. According to him, he was again home alone that day when Maddie came over and asked if he wanted to play baseball. He said that's exactly what they did in his backyard, but at some point, she got hit with the ball near her left eye and started crying. He reportedly brought her up to his room to calm her down, but then he started freaking out because she was bleeding and she wasn't supposed to be there. From here, Joshua said he hit Maddie 3 times over the head to stop her crying. He again didn't want to get in trouble, so he, quote, pried off the side of his waterbed and pushed her underneath. His dad then actually did come home from work, and he reportedly realized that he could still hear her making sounds from their living room. So he went back in, pulled her out, and stabbed her 7 to 9 times in the chest. Now the thing is, according to Maddie's autopsy, her eye was never hit with a baseball. And when police looked at Josh's computer, they found that he'd been watching violent and explicit material just before and after all of this took place. They also found a photo of Maddie's older sister in his room that he would have had to have stolen from their family's home. Later that year, Joshua was taken to trial as an adult, and while the prosecution argued he planned this, the defense said he really did panic and was just scared of his father. He was ultimately sentenced to life without parole, but then in 2012, that was deemed as unconstitutional for minors. In 2017, he was resentenced, and it was actually upheld, despite those who initially convicted him saying that they wouldn't sentence a 14-year-old like that today. He has really never publicly spoken about what he did to Maddie.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
Elizabeth Fritzl's father may be released from prison after being ruled to no longer be a threat to society. Elizabeth went missing just after she turned 18, and her father managed to convince both her mom and the police that she had run away. The truth was that he was holding her captive in their basement, and she gave birth to 7 of his children down there over the next 24 years. On August 28, 1984, Joseph lured Elizabeth downstairs under the guise of helping him carry a 3-by-2-foot door. His family thought he'd spent the past 6 years down there building a bomb shelter, but really, this door was the last thing he needed to seal his underground prison for Elizabeth. As she held the door frame in place for him, he shoved her inside, and he never let her back out. Up until Elizabeth was 22, she was kept in complete isolation and assaulted by her father on a daily basis. It was at this point in 1988 when she gave birth to her first 2 kids, Kirsten and Stefan, with just a pair of dirty scissors. She did her best to raise them underground, while her other siblings who you see here were able to go on vacations and live their normal lives. At 26, Elizabeth went on to give birth to her 3rd child, Lisa, and she actually didn't stay downstairs. In May of 1993, Elizabeth's mom found her in a cardboard box on their front porch. With her came a note addressed from Elizabeth explaining that this was her little girl who she just couldn't care for. Of course, Joseph was the one to place the box there, but to Elizabeth's mom, this was confirmation that she was alive and she really did run away. She took her granddaughter in and raised her with her husband, completely unaware that he was really the father. Now, about a year later, when Elizabeth would have been 27, her 4th child, Monica, showed up on the porch just like Lisa did. And then 2 years after that, baby Alexander showed up too. Altogether, Elizabeth had these 7 children in that basement, with 3 of them raised upstairs thinking their mother abandoned each of them at birth, and the other 3 held captive in the basement with her. Tragically, the 7th child, Michael, died just after he was born, and Joseph incinerated his body. As we know, in 2008, the 3 kids upstairs are teenagers, and Elizabeth is 42 years old and still with the others in the basement. The youngest with her was 5 at this point, but her oldest, Kirsten, was 19 now, and she had never seen the sun. She became incredibly ill that spring, and for the first time ever, Joseph agreed that she seriously needed medical attention. On April 19th, Kirsten alone went to the hospital with Joseph, and he told medical staff that his missing daughter had just left her with him. She had life-threatening kidney failure, and it was clear that she had never seen a doctor in her life. The staff became suspicious, and they ultimately contacted police. With this report, authorities broadcasted a public appeal for the missing mother to come forward and provide Kirsten's medical history. And then, possibly in a panic, Joseph suddenly released her and the 2 other kids from the cellar. He told his wife that after 24 years, Elizabeth had decided to come home. After being let out, Elizabeth got Joseph to take her to the hospital, and one of the doctors tipped off police that she was there. Joseph was arrested on hospital grounds, and Elizabeth refused to say anything until she was promised that she would never have to see him again. They also gave the kids DNA tests, and they were able to confirm all 6 of them were Elizabeth and her father's children. In 2009, Joseph was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole in 2024. Again, unbelievably, new psychiatric reports have just ruled that he is no longer a threat to society. And for those wondering about the kids, they, quote, have new identities and are living with Elizabeth in an undisclosed location in Austria, only known as Village X. They're reportedly free and back together, but each have their own struggles adjusting to society.